Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, meeting number 26. Orders of the day pursuant to Standing Order 81, bracket 4, main estimates 2008-2009. And today, just for the information of the committee, we'll be looking at votes on 1, 5, 10, 15, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, and 75 under transport, referred to the committee on Thursday, February 28, 2008. Joining us today, the Minister, the Honourable Lawrence Cannon, Minister of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. And joining him at our table is from the Department of Transport, Mr. Louis Ranger, Deputy Minister, Mr. Andre Morency, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Management and Crown Corporation Governance, and Infrastructure Canada, from Infrastructure Canada, David Clough, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Services Branch and Chief Financial Officer. I'm making sure I've got everybody here. Thank you. And I will advise members that we are being televised today, and I would also ask members, because I know there's going to be lots of questions of the Minister and the Department, that I'll try and keep the timelines as tight as possible, and you might want to watch for me, and I'll give you the 1-minute warning just so that you do know, so everyone can have a chance to address the Minister. Mr. Minister, welcome, and we look forward to your comments and answers throughout the morning's meeting.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My officials and I are here today to discuss the 2008-2009 main estimates for the Transport, Infrastructure and Communities portfolio. This is my third opportunity to appear before this committee and to deliver the main estimates. Now, since my first appearance, significant progress has been made within the portfolio. Now, as you know, it is a wide-ranging portfolio which brings together Transport Canada, Infrastructure Canada, and 16 Crown corporations. In this portfolio, we continue to tackle some of the most important issues facing Canada today, including the productivity of our economy, transportation safety and security, environmental sustainability, and the quality of life in our cities and communities as supported by public infrastructure. Now, members of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities have made important contributions in each of these areas. And I'd like to take this opportunity at the outset to thank you for your active involvement in the legislative agenda and the number of important policy decisions and questions that have an impact on the portfolio. Now, specifically, I'd like to thank you and thank the members of the community for its study of Bill C-23, which modifies the Canada Marine Act. The proposed amendments will strengthen the operating framework of Canada Port Authorities, helping to build a stronger and more competitive marine sector. Also key was the committee's participation in the study of rail safety and subsequent Railway Safety Act. I also thank the committee for its consideration of the future role of the Navigable Waters Protection Act, the NWPA. We believe that the NWPA, one of the oldest pieces of legislation in Canada, needs to reflect current economic needs and respond to the increased volume and variety of uses of Canada's waterways. I look forward to working with you as we move forward on this and other issues central to transportation and infrastructure in Canada. Au cours de la dernière année, collègues,
over the past year, this government has made serious investments in transportation and infrastructure throughout Canada. In doing so, we are improving the quality of life of Canadians and making Canada more competitive on the world stage. As you know, we are moving forward on Canada's biggest infrastructure program ever. The Building Canada Infrastructure Plan is $33 billion worth of investments in matters that are important to Canadians, such as the environment, the economy, and stronger and better communities. Our plan provides an unprecedented long-term predictable investment that will allow provinces, territories, and communities to plan for the future. In fact, more than half of the funding, $17.6 billion to be exact, is going to municipalities through the 100% GST rebate and the gas tax fund in order to modernize Canada's infrastructure. It's expected that Building Canada, with other levels of government and funding partners, will generate at least $50 billion in new investment. Since the Prime Minister launched the Building Canada plan last November, we have made significant progress in implementing this plan. We have signed framework agreements with 8 provinces and territories, and we are well advanced and close to concluding agreements with the remaining provinces. And we're investing the gas tax in over 2,000 community projects. Under Building Canada, we are making early progress through priority investments across Canada, and these support a more productive economy, such as our $100 million commitment to improve highways in New Brunswick, a cleaner environment. We have announced $1 billion in funding for public transit across the Greater Toronto Area, and this to reduce gridlock. We are also making key investments to support the delivery of clean drinking water, such as the $50 million investment for the Huron-Elgin-London Clean Water Project in Southern Ontario. And we're supporting more livable communities, such as the $40 million investment for the Centre of Sport Excellence in Calgary and the $8 million contribution for the Cultural Precinct Quartier des Spectacles in Montreal.
We continue to take action in each transportation mode. With respect to public transit, we brought investments to $1 billion per year, and in budget 2008, we've set aside $50 million to support capital investments through the Public Transit Capital Trust. In the rail sector, we passed Bill C-8, protecting rail shippers from potential abuse of market power by railways. We also began a review of rail freight service and signed 2 memorandums of understanding with the Railway Association of Canada. The first enhances the railway security, or the security of rail transportation in Canada, and the second addresses the issue of railway emissions. Both underscore the central role of railways to trade in Canada. We are also making significant gains in the air sector. We are very encouraged by the progress that has been made in the year since we launched Blue Sky, and that the momentum for more liberalized air travel continues to build. Now, last June, when the Prime Minister met his European colleagues at the Canada-European Summit, the leaders agreed to launch negotiations for a comprehensive air services agreement between Canada and the European Union. I am very happy to report to this committee that 1 year after the launch of Blue Sky, the third round of negotiations has begun in Brussels. This is good news for travelers and for the travel industry. Now, in the marine sector, as I mentioned previously, with your assistance, we have moved ahead with amendments to the Canada Marine Act. I was also happy last month to announce that the Government of Canada is providing $101 million over 5 years to help Marine Atlantic Incorporated acquire a charter vessel that will address increasing traffic to and from Newfoundland and Labrador. We've made progress in building a more sustainable transportation system as well. And we must. Transportation accounts for about 25% of all Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. And that's why we're moving forward with national fuel consumption regulations for new cars and light trucks. And it's also why we're moving ahead in key areas of our eco-transportation strategy, which covers all modes of transportation. We are also working with our provincial and territorial colleagues to improve our environment and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by delivering clean water, green energy, and cleaning up contaminated sites. Honorables collègues, voilà l'action que nous avons.
Honorable members, this is the work we are currently doing, and as you can see, we have accomplished much together. But much work yet remains. That is why, today, I am asking you to recommend that Parliament approve the spending in the main estimates that were tabled by the President of the Treasury Board on February 28. The 2008-2009 main estimates for the portfolio, which total $4.544 billion, include $1.032 billion for Transport Canada and $2.456 billion for the Office of Infrastructure Canada. The remainder of the funding is allocated to the various Crown corporations. Because we don't have time to go into all the numbers, I would instead like to briefly discuss the two major components of this portfolio, Transport Canada and infrastructure. For Transport Canada, the 2008-2009 main estimates, $1.032 billion, are showing a net increase of $173.3 million from the $859 million level in the 2007-2008 main estimates. The $173.3 million net increase is due to increases of $293.5 million for new initiatives and changes to ongoing programs that are offset by $120.2 million in decreases in funding for the winding down of programs and government-wide reductions. Of the $1.032 billion, 9.7%, or $100.1 million, is for flow-through payments, including $54.9 billion for the Confederation Bridge, $41.9 million for the St. Lawrence Seaway, and $3.3 million for Victoria Bridge. The remaining resources of $932.2 million, combined with respendable revenue of $345.6 million, represents a $1.28 billion budget that is available to the Department to cover the following expenditures: $471.7 million for grants and contributions programs, $382.5 million for personal costs, $278.3 million for other operating costs, $78.2 million for capital, and $67 million for employee benefit plans. Let me now turn to the infrastructure portion of the portfolio.
$456 billion, a net increase of $437.8 million from the $2.18 billion in the 2007-2008 main estimates. The $437.8 million net increase is due to the greater spending on infrastructure programs, and in particular, I would like to mention $327.8 million for the Provincial Territorial Infrastructure Base Funding Program for the second year of this program, and $197.5 million increase for the Gas Tax Fund, which steps up in total from $800 million to close to $1 billion this year. Now, these increases were offset to some degree by decreases in funding for programs where most of the commitments were made in previous years. Now, of course, the estimates also provide for funding needed for the operations of the department and for the delivery of its programs in the amount of $37.5 million. En ma qualité de ministre, j'assume un certain nombre.
As Minister, I have a number of other portfolio responsibilities that do not require any appropriations from Parliament and are therefore not displayed in the estimates. They include the Ship Source Oil Pollution Fund, the Great Lakes Pilotage Authority, the Pacific Pilotage Authority, the Atlantic Pilotage Authority, the Laurentian Pilotage Authority, the Blue Water Bridge Authority, Ridley Terminals, Inc., the Royal Canadian Mint and subsidiary, and Canada Lands Company Limited. Honourable colleagues, my limited time today doesn't allow me to go into detail regarding all the items on the list. However, I believe the numbers I have presented today demonstrate the importance this government places on the priorities we have identified under this portfolio. I would welcome the questions from committee members on our overall approach or on any of the specific measures contained in these estimates. Thank you.
Mr. Volpe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Minister, and your colleagues in the department. Je voudrais commencer par
I'd like to start by thanking the Minister for acknowledging the work performed by members of Parliament sitting around this table, the committee members. We have been working in committee to solve problems which are problems for the government, and it is our pleasure.
our work. I'd like to ask a few questions. And realizing that we don't have a lot of time, I can't, Minister, let go of the opportunity to ask you about the Auditor General's report about your department, and in particular, in this instance, about the SMS system as it relates to aviation. I do that because members around this table, I think, worked diligently to ensure that we would have an appropriate system in place in a most nonpartisan fashion. However, it would appear that the Auditor General confirmed some of the findings of the Canadian Business Aviation Association, and that is specifically, just to name a few, that the system is not delivering in a fashion consistent with the expectations of this committee at least. For example, and I'd like you to address some of these, Minister, because we still haven't passed that piece of legislation in the House, and some of the support that members around the table had been given might be conditional upon your answers. First of all, it would appear that there is insufficient training of your officials in the department for the oversight capacity that they were charged with. 15% of them hadn't completed their training. Another 15% were insufficiently trained or qualified to do their work. And the number of inspectors, which we had been led to believe would remain constant, if not in fact increase, has actually been dropping at a rate of about 8% per annum. So the combination of departmental oversight plus, or direct inspection and regulation, plus the auditing of systems that had to be approved first, appears to have fallen by the wayside. Now, I'm sure that you've got some answers to that, but from our perspective, the effort and energy that we have put in trying to fashion a system that would receive public support does not appear to be reflected in the performance, I don't know, of your department's ability to deliver on the expectations of this committee and I guess the public.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Volpe, for those comments, but also the opportunity to set the record straight on what has occurred indeed. I just want to, reiterate that air transportation in Canada is the safest in the world. The Auditor General, along with the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has recognized Transport Canada as a world leader in implementing safety management systems in aviation organizations. Now, the Auditor General does not question, colleagues, the safety of the traveling public, but rather the report indicates and evaluates some administrative and planning aspects of how Transport Canada is managing the transition to safety management systems. So I'll let my Deputy Minister go into the detail as to what has occurred since the report has been tabled, if you wish. It'll take a couple of, or
I don't mind, Mr. Minister, because this is an opportunity for us to hold the political branch accountable, and I know you speak for them, and I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but I do want to ask a couple of other questions. So if the deputy wants to answer, I'm hoping he'll be brief so that the chairman will allow me to carry on.
Just, I guess, Mr. Volpe, in terms of the number of inspectors, I think that he can reassure you that no, there isn't a decrease of 8% per year. Questions that you've asked more specifically.
Allow me maybe 2 quick points, and if there are more specific questions, Mr. Mervyn Proust could address them. But the first point, when you talk about business aircraft, this is the safest area within a very safe sector. Why? Because if you're a businessman and can afford to own an aircraft, you make sure you have the best pilot in the country, the best mechanic. So all the records, all the statistics show this is the safest area within a very safe sector. Point number 1. Point number 2, that the gaps, the deficiencies that you've identified are based on an audit that we initiated ourselves. We didn't need the AG. We initiated that audit and are taking specific actions on training and whatever gaps were identified by that self-imposed audit, because it's a new model, and we just want to make sure that the public is assured that this is preserving and improving our safety record.
Thank you, Mr. Ranger, and I think it's important to put on the record at least that some of the biggest critics have not accepted that kind of argument. Judge Moshansky, who appeared before this committee, appears not to have been convinced, as well as I guess the Pilots Association is also not convinced so far that the experiences that you've had with the business community, which you're quite right, ought to have as an interest, a personal interest, as opposed to merely a business interest, safety of their equipment. I'm looking forward to an answer on that, but I want to shift gears for a moment, if I might. Minister, one of your colleagues in Cabinet has pointed to one of the issues that you've raised here, and that is the efficiency of our transportation system as it relates to bridges, and especially the ones in the Detroit-Windsor corridor, and has pointed to security as being the biggest problem to free-flowing trade between us. Now, I know that you made an announcement just a couple of weeks ago regarding building additional capacity. That bridge that crosses the river right now is only operating at 50% capacity. Are you working with your colleague in Cabinet, most particularly CBSA Minister, to ensure that there is actual free flow of commerce between Windsor and Detroit? And if so, what is it that you're doing that they're not catching at the border? Because it's nice to hear the words, but we want to know specifically what is it that's happening to make this happen. That bridge is not going to be built next week.
Yeah, well, rapidly, I just want to reassure you and Mr. Volpe, you know full well that there has been a DRIC process, Detroit River International Crossing process, that's in place. This government, as well as the previous government, did look at it. So in terms of the conclusion as to the capacity of the bridge, yes, today there might be an instant photo of the situation, but the underlying fact remains that as we move forward, 2012, for instance, that is when that capacity is going to be at its fullest. And therefore, there is an important issue here to be able to construct a new bridge by 2013 to be able to handle the new capacity that's going to be coming forward. Quite rapidly, I'd say, colleague, that the whole idea of being able to, yes, accommodate the Americans in terms of their preoccupations with security challenges is one of the challenges that we face, but at the same time find ways and develop processes that will enable our country to continue to benefit from that trading partner or the relationship with that trading partner. So I believe the first time I came to this committee, colleague, that is one of the major things that we addressed in terms of, yes, we're accommodating the Americans' concerns with protection and making sure that we can indeed meet some of the challenges that they put forward, but at the same time making sure our borders are open, they're open for business, and that Canada remain extremely competitive in a world market that is becoming more and more tough.
Monsieur Laframboise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment respecting what Mr. Volpe said and the inspection of business aircraft. Minister, we've had wide-ranging discussions in committee on the number, and we have a letter signed by Mr. Grégoire on March 14th from your department, and the Auditor General tells us in her report on page 16 of her report that there is an 8% reduction in security services. So who are we to believe, Mr. Minister? When your officials come and appear in committee, are they giving us the right information? My first question is this. You vaunted on page 26.3 in the estimates, you talked about spending for a ferry for the Atlantic. And I'm thinking now about the problems in the Magdalene Islands and the problems they're having with ferries. And you said that you had a pilot project? But I can tell you that there hasn't been spending yet, but there's a winter coming, and we're going to have to do something about it. Thank you. I'm going to ask the Deputy Minister to answer your question, and also questions about Mr. Grégoire's letter with respect to what the Auditor General has to say. But this said, I would like to reassure you and reassure the people in the Magdalene Islands that there have been discussions with the mayor of Cap-aux-Meules. We've had an exchange of correspondence on the subject, and you know that the person that there will be a reorganization of ferry services. This said, the commitment I've taken with the mayor is in the following year, this coming year, there will be a pilot project so that we can have a very concrete experience, and there will be a business plan that I will be presenting to government in order that we can look at the service 12 months and have a 12-month-a-year service for the people in the Magdalene Islands. So I've been corresponding with the mayor. I have said this. I have repeated these things publicly because I want the mayor to know that, and others to know, that when Conservatives make a commitment there or anywhere else in Canada, we keep our promises, and we hope that that's what Quebecers will see and remember. So there's nothing in the budget. There was nothing in the budget for 07-08, so are you going to pay with your own money? Sir, when we say there's money to go forward with a pilot project, usually he can support this with cash. My other question has to do with the vote 26-2. I see that there's for Canada Post, I see that they've had funding cut by $25 billion. And I'd like to know, how much less are we going to be paying Post Canada for this coming year? Mr. Laframboise, the government committed to helping Canada Post with their pension fund, and we had decided that we were going to cut our contribution by $25 million a year. There's going to be $75 million this year, and then $50 million. So we will be supporting them with the pension fund, and we decided that by 2011, Canada Post should be able to assume the pension fund. And what about rural postal services? You're telling us that there is no relation to cuts in services at Canada Post and the cuts in the estimates? Well, there's no cause and effect relationship. At the present time, the House of Commons is supporting a motion for the maintenance and, in some cases, reestablishment of rural postal service. And the people at Canada Post are busy looking at various drop-off sites. And the House of Commons has demanded that things be done, and the process is running smoothly. We will have assessed some 100,000 drop-off points, postal boxes. There are perhaps changes to be made because of urban spread. In other cases, we've asked, in order that access be safer, we've asked that there be delivery, and we've also asked for postal boxes to be moved. And yes, there are difficulties, and people are used to their way of doing things. But we also have to think about the safety of people who deliver the mail, and about questions bearing on people's health. So, Mr. Laframboise, and I'll end on this, we're acting in the most conscientious and most enlightened way we can. But you're talking about, in terms of transfers to Post Canada, you're talking about the future of Canada Post, and you're saying even if it is a Crown corporation, we'll be revisiting its what it does, that there will be services that will no longer be offered. But I'll get to this in my next question. My question is, you have announced monies for the Windsor-Detroit corridor. You've talked about money for the Champlain Bridge and the Jacques-Cartier Bridge, $21 million. Is this part of your deciding whether you're going to rebuild the Champlain Bridge or what? Well, first of all, I'd like to get back to your assertion that Canada Post is going to be cut left, right, and centre. Mr. Montmorency said that there will be money going to Canada Post this year, and we have a committee that will be looking at all this, because as you know, and if you don't know it, perhaps your children and grandchildren know, there has been a revolution in communications. It's called the Internet, and there are new ways of dealing with things. It's very important that in our operations there are things that are of interest to Canadians and parliamentarians, so we have a committee whose purpose is to make recommendations to us. You'll see the recommendations. And Mr. Chairman, my colleague assumes that we're going to make cuts. I think it's rather premature. We're going to look at the recommendations before we act. And personally, I think it important as a parliamentarian to make decisions based on information and not go, shooting in all directions. based on information which have not been validated. Mr. Massé.
Being here. I have a question on the Auditor General report to start, then I want to move to my favorite topic, the Windsor-Detroit corridor, as usual. With regards to the Auditor General report, I find Mr. Ranger's comments really naive. To expect business people to basically have the best mechanics and pilots and leave it at that is not acceptable. There's other employees who actually use those planes as well too, and unfortunately there is a record in Canada. That's why we have a National Day of Mourning, and there's an international one, because workers are put at risk sometimes because people cut corners. And tragically, we've had actually some business aircraft crashes that have actually lost the lives of employees, and I'm not suggesting that corners were cut there, but it's a significant problem. And the Auditor General, you're right, did not look at safety management systems. I've never been so naive to believe that that's what's needed by alone to be the best system. There has to be oversight. That's what the Auditor General identified. So what I'd like to know from your department is why the National Audit Program was canceled as we moved into transition to a new program of safety management systems. Why was the old traditional model broken and discarded before we knew what the real risks were?
Thank you. At the outset, I'll offer a comment. I don't think that the Deputy Minister was suggesting that other people who are involved in safety management systems within the industry are not implicated in the sustaining and the support of that. And I think that it's unfair to say that the Deputy Minister was only looking at one class of people in the business community as being the only ones who should be basically looking at it, and that that excludes other individuals who are within that industry. So that's not the purpose of the safety management system. As you know, Mr. Massey, the safety management system that we're pushing and that we want to be able to put in place is one whereby we add an additional layer of protection and security. We are not taking anything away from the existing rules and regulation. We are not downsizing. We are not deregulating. We are indeed maintaining one mission. And what is that mission? That mission is that Canada and Transport Canada and aviation still and maintain its #1 spot in the world to be the safest organization and operation. And that is what is challenge. That's the challenge that we're facing. So, you know.
Was the National Audit Program canceled, though?
Well, Merlin Proust is here, and he'll pick up that question gladly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The National Audit Program was an administrative construct to create teams across the nation to deal with the major organizations, whether they be the large airports or large carriers. That centralized administration of the major audits was what was canceled, not the audits themselves. So on a required basis, the same audits that were done before the National Audit Program existed, or after the audit program, or while that audit program existed, will continue today.
I have documentation
For example,
saying
there's
that it's been canceled.
The National Audit
I wanna
Program
move
as
on
an
to,
administrative construct has been canceled.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, I would like to move on to the Windsor-Detroit corridor, please, Mr. Minister. And there is news media reports today that the location of the next border crossing and the plaza has been cited on the Canadian side. A decision is made. Do you wish to confirm that situation? News media reports out of CBC, and now we're actually on other news wires, are saying that that decision has been made on the Canadian side. Is that correct?
That is not correct. No decision has been made. It's in the state, of course, as a rumor and unfounded sources. What I can say is that basically our intention, you know, the environmental assessment that is taking place is somewhat different in the United States as it is in Canada. And in the United States, what we have witnessed is the completion of that environmental assessment within the next couple of weeks, I'd say, so that hopefully by the end of June, maybe by the beginning of July, we'll be in a position to announce the location for the crossing.
Well, for the record, Mr. Minister, I recently held a meeting in Sandwich Town on the border slight location and crossing, and this has been consistent with what I've been saying for a number of years. Nearly 200 people showed up. Not a single person support the plaza location and the actual bridge location that's in Sandwichtown by Sterling Fuels. For those not aware of it, one of the locations that has been narrowed down is actually next to a fueling depot for the Great Lakes that is actually going to be potentially expanded. It also crosses over to another fueling depot in the United States. I think that's a significant security risk. Second to that is it's in Sandwichtown, will cost more, and will actually disrupt the community. There is consensus to support a crossing downstream, where there is actually towards Brighton Beach, and we're hopeful that this will be taken into consideration because it is important for the history of the fabric of that community and also national security. Now, if I can move towards a question, we do know that you have ministers out there right now. Minister Prentice is actually in the United States drumming up the border. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. But he's over talking about the border. But we know that the Auditor General's report yesterday actually brought up the concern over safety issues of immigration and refugee. That story made the Washington Post, a number of Associated Press newswires in the United States. It raised the issue of security of Canada. Now, Bill C-43 has been tabled by the Minister of Public Safety right now, and that's also going to affect the customs process right now. Now, how much money or how much consultation is being involved with your department to ensure the free flow of traffic, goods, and services if we're going to be changing our inspection process as well?
Well, what I can say is clearly the officials in our department work with the officials in Minister Day's department. He, of course, as you know, has the lead on this specific issue. I can address questions that deal with transport, but on the very specific Deputy Minister, do you have any comments to formulate on Mr. Massey's question? Does anybody?
Well, I certainly could say we have an ongoing relationship. We consult each other on our mutual legislative proposals with CBSA regularly, weekly. Mrs. Burr is our ADM policy, whose responsibility it is to maintain that relationship.
Mr. Chair, the department is working closely with CBSA on a whole host of issues involved with the border, and we are in regular communication. That doesn't mean that we're always party to every element of what the agency is doing, but we're working closely on the DRIC process and on issues around border facilitation.
What I would suggest to the department is that you actively engage on Bill C-43. We know very well it doesn't matter how many booths you open. If you can't process them, it actually costs jobs. So this is important because not only just in terms of trucks that are entering Canada from the United States, but also our own vehicles and just in time. So I would suggest that the department has to be very active on this because it doesn't matter how many bridges we build. If we don't actually have the processing down right, nothing will get through. Now, I want to quickly go to Mr. Chair, to the Minister with regards to the Office of P3. Last time you were here, you said that this office would be developed and set in the first quarter. I'm concerned about that. It could delay the process more. I noticed in your speech here, you noted that you actually have a Blue Water Bridge noted here, where they actually didn't require any funds. That is a system right there where they do public bonding, where we own and operate the bridge in a public entity. Why not drop the P3 concept for this border crossing and go with a successful model like Sarnia and Blue Water?
Let me come back to a couple of comments that you made previously, Mr. Massey. I just want to reassure you that this project in particular, in terms of job creation, because you alluded to it, in the phases of construction, particularly the link between the 401 and to the new crossing, will engage between 10 to 15,000 jobs in that area. As well, with the construction of the bridge, we're talking about another 10,000 jobs that are going to be involved. So in that area of southern Ontario, we're looking at 25,000 jobs over the next several years to be able to construct and to develop this new border crossing between Canada and the United States. The question you're raising is a question that we did discuss the other day. It's our opinion that when we seek to build, for instance, this project, we are seeking public funds, of course, but we're also seeking a mechanism through which we can merge, or at least we can leverage, I should say, private funds to be able to complete this. We have examples. I've noted in my comments the Confederation Bridge, for instance, which is owned 30% by a pension fund in this country, which is a private initiative whereby there is a leveraging of funds to be able to help and support and sustain new infrastructure in the country. And philosophically speaking, that is the direction, that's the intent that this government wants to play and take, and we believe that's the right course of action to take.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Minister, and your staff for appearing. I'd like to follow up on the questions that Messrs. Volpe and Massey asked about the Auditor General's report. The Auditor General made a number of observations and recommendations regarding the implementation of safety management systems in the aviation sector. And first of all, what has been your response to those observations and recommendations? Have you accepted the recommendations? Have you responded to the observations?
Thank you, Mr. Fast. I'll ask Merlin Proust to, as they change his name tag from Chris Bird to Merlin Proust, to respond to that question.
Thanks very much for the question. The Auditor General's report and the recommendations that came from it have been accepted totally by the government. They were reinforcing, in many cases, things that we were already aware of in terms of weaknesses in our approach to putting the system into place. I should note also at this time that the Auditor General also took note of the fact that there's time to make the changes that she recommended, and I can reinforce that because the SMS implementation is in its early stages, except for the airline sector and the large AMO sector, which we've now been at implementation for 3 years, and we've learned a lot through that process, and we're applying those lessons learned as we go along. So yes, the audit report is very helpful to us. Yes, we're going to do everything we can to put those recommendations in place, but no, we're not in a situation where we've allowed anything to get away from us at this point.
In her report, does the Auditor General ever challenge the underlying usefulness of SMS as improving aviation safety in Canada?
Absolutely. There's no challenge on that. Indeed, she's saying that we're going in the right course, the right direction.
Absolutely, Minister.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because there's some out there that are still suggesting that SMS is not a good system. It's something that is not going to enhance aviation safety in Canada. And that is simply not true. Now, Mr. Minister, I'd like to ask you a question about Bill C-7, which is essentially the bill which is presently before the House, which would actually implement and regulate the implementation of SMS in Canada. We had consultations from the aviation sector. They came from across Canada. They represented different stakeholders within the aviation industry. I believe we had some 19 committee meetings. We had, how many days of debate did we have? We had 9 days of debate in the House of Commons. And yet the NDP, for some reason, I just don't understand it, but they delayed the legislation. In fact, they hoisted the legislation, delayed it for an additional 6 months, and who knows what they're going to do right now. And my question to you, Mr. Minister, is this. Has the delay in implementing this bill and getting it passed in the House hindered your efforts to actually improve the implementation of SMS in our aviation industry?
Thank you for the question, colleague. I'm going to ask Mr. Proust to go directly to the question that unfortunately I didn't have time to answer before from Mr. Laframboise and from Mr. Massey in terms of the Auditor General saying minus 8% vis-a-vis what we're stating and the numbers that we have as the number of inspectors that are out there. So maybe we can set that issue aside and then address the other issue as to why there is delay tactics here. We're stalling. I know you will after Friday.
Asking the questions, Mr. Chair.
With respect to inspector numbers, Mr. Gregoire stated, and we've stated several times, that the staffing levels that we're dealing with have not changed. In fact, since 2001, we've gone from 866 staff to authorized staff to somewhere around 871 or 873, if my memory serves. So it's not a question of changing the authorized staffing levels. What the Auditor General has picked out is the normal fluctuations that happen based on how the staffing processes works, the availability of employees to fill the vacancies that have shown up. So there's nothing in the report that would indicate that we changed our staffing levels, to my knowledge. What it has indicated is that, like a lot of the industry, and not just the aviation industry, there are problems with staffing, which we are well on our way with both departmental and aviation industry-related recruitment and retention initiatives through our human resource planning.
All right, if I could get back to the original question, which is, are the delays in getting Bill C-7 passed in the House hampering your efforts to do a better job of implementing SMS?
The bill basically is one, Mr. Fast, that would create a legislative basis for the establishment of SMS.
On a point of order?
Thank you. We're all aware that the government has pulled C-7 from the order paper. It's their decision to do so. It has not been the decision of the New Democratic Party. The government has put C-7 on the order paper and taken it off. That has been the reality.
Thank you. It's more a point of debate, I think.
Yes, thank you.
I will ask the minister to, or are we back to your question, Mr. Fast?
Well, since Mr. Massey raised a point of order, which wasn't a point of order, just to respond.
No, Mr.
It's very clear it was a hoist motion that the NDP imposed, delayed it by 6 months.
Continue with your questioning.
Please, Mr. Massey.
Well, no, I was just going to say that I would ask colleagues, of course, to adopt this piece of legislation as soon as possible. I think it's an important building block in the safety management systems that we want to put in place. Now, I know that there are concerns that have been addressed. I feel that those concerns that were raised here have been essentially addressed by the number of people that this committee has met, and I would just encourage the committee to adopt this piece of legislation, which I believe to be extremely important for the future.
One last question, and that's getting back to the level of inspectors that we have right now. Are any of you individuals that are appearing here as witnesses aware of anything within Bill C-7 that would address the level of inspectors? Is there anything within Bill C-7 that would prevent the number of inspections being reduced?
Well, I'm told by my officials here, no, that's not the case.
Prevent or permit, Mr. Fast?
Well, prevent.
No, not at all. In fact, the system is set up such that we will have the capacity to do things the way we've been doing them in the past, if that should prove to be necessary.
All right. So you don't expect that the level of inspectors will go down. Is that correct?
Not based on what we've been presented with so far. That's not not something that's.
I just want to repeat here, what SMS is an additional layer, safety, that we want to put in place. We are not saying that we are withdrawing. We're not saying that we're cutting back. We're not saying that we're taking away. We've made the demonstration that we still have inspectors. Nobody's pulling inspectors away. That would be terrible to pull inspectors away. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to empower the other members of the industry so that they can also participate in safety management systems. And I repeat, we're number one in the world. We want to continue to be number one. And we're addressing new ways to do it. And when you have an international civil aviation organization such as ICAO that says you guys are going in the right direction, not only are you going in the right direction, we want to be able to use the model that you're putting forward as the basis to be able to export that elsewhere in the world. I think that that's a darn good thing for Canada, and it indicates to me that we're going in the right direction. Thank you.
Mr. Zed is going to share his time or give his time to Mr. Volpe. Am I correct?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Mr. Zed.
I'm tired of sharing my time. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I have a couple of quick questions. I was looking through the estimates for the Atlantic Gateway, and I wasn't able to find it. Perhaps you could draw my attention to it, or is it in your estimates?
Well, this is.
Is it just policy still?
No, I'll let the deputy answer that because he's got a list of numbers here. But
It's there's a $2.1 billion fund for gateways and border crossings, and within that, Treasury Board has allotted some resources to the department to support all the analysis that we need to do before we identify specific projects. So it's funded within that fund.
Okay. So specifically, I think, Minister, you would likely be able to anticipate what a couple of my questions might be. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, as you know, have been in the middle of a superhighway, a marine superhighway called the Digby Ferry. And I was wondering whether or not you might today be in a position to confirm that your government would be ready to recommit money for the Digby Ferry, specifically whether or not you would consider using the Atlantic Gateway Initiative for that. So that's one of my questions. If you'd like, I can give you 3 or 4 of them at once. Do you wish to?
no, keep going.
The other one is the St. John Harbour Bridge, another favorite subject of ours in New Brunswick. I noticed that in the estimates that there are other federal bridges, and I was wondering what distinguishes the St. John Harbour Bridge from other federal bridges, and why the federal government, after, and this isn't necessarily directed at a party. As you know, sir, this is a long-standing issue with the people of New Brunswick and the federal government, and I was wondering whether or not you would consider, once again, forgiving the debt on the Harbour Bridge, considering the fact that the bridge originally was built for $18 million, and the debt on the bridge is now, I think, $24 million or $23 million, and I know that the tolls on the bridge have gone up. The other thing, sir, I was wondering, you may be aware of the fact that southern New Brunswick is going through a major energy boom. We're expecting anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30,000 new people moving into southern New Brunswick, and I know that your government has been instrumental in working together with past governments have, with the provincial government on a new border crossing between Calais and St. Stephen. And I want to compliment the government for following through with that. But I am concerned specifically about rail service. And I was wondering whether or not you could indicate to us whether or not the government has any plans to consider passenger rail service, or to assist with a private sector company being involved in passenger rail service. And my last question involves the small airport policy questions. And sir, I'm sure you appreciate the fact that small airports are very important for us in Atlantic Canada. And I was wondering whether or not you might take a minute or two to review small airport policy for us, and how you might, as a government, reinvest in smaller communities that need funds for capital infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Yeah. No, I just want. This reminds me, Mr. Zed. You know when you used to go and we have our exams in college, you go for the first question, the 6th, the 7th, you'd read through the thing first. Well, I mean, there's about 6 questions here.
But we've got a good chairman. He'll be very anxious to hear from you.
On the Digby issue, Digby ferries and Bay ferries, of course, as you know, there is an agreement in place until the end of the year, and I can assure you that we are working on the file. On the harbor, the St. John Harbour Bridge Authority, well, the debt repayment plan will begin in 2009 as the additional revenue generated by the 2007 toll increase, I think 25 cents if I'm not mistaken, has been allocated to other key aspects of maintaining the project in terms of maintenance. On the energy boom, well, I think that's great news that that is occurring in the province. I failed to see where Transport Canada would essentially be implicated, but maybe you can come back to me on that specific issue. On small airports, I know it is an issue, not only, of course, in New Brunswick, but elsewhere in the country. As you know, in the Building Canada plan, one of the categories that we put forward and acknowledged as being important in terms of our communities is to be able to fund small airports. So the procedure, as you know, is there, but we will allow small airports as a category, and we will look at it in the view of funding them if possible.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre. Ça me fait plaisir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to see the big boss from Transport Canada, the person who decides on the main objectives and directions of the department. And I'm sure you're assuming, and we hope you're assuming your responsibilities. I'd like to link up to a question put earlier on the Jacques Cartier and Champlain bridges. There was $21 to $22 million being spent on these bridges, only that amount of money. And you know that Champlain Bridge needs major repairs, and there have been announcements about it. There was also the announcement of a light rail. There is a analysis that remains to be completed respecting the Champlain Bridge and whether it can be repaired, and if the light rail can be incorporated with the bridge. I'd like to know just what direction you're headed in at your department. Thank you, Mr. Carrier, and I'm very happy to see you here, to see you as a spokesman for transport for your party. Let's talk about what's more important first. There's something that should be underscored. Contracts for rebuilding the Jacques Cartier Bridge deck. This is going to be some $60 million. So the project, we did give out the contract recently. When you talk, the money you're talking about, it's money we spend annually for maintaining these bridges. Champlain Bridge, according to what I'm told, is a bridge that is very safe, but whose deck will have to be redone in 10 to 15 years. And it does serve the purposes it was built for. It's very safe. And you're very right to mention the gridlock around Montreal Island. We know that the Champlain Bridge sees over 57,000 vehicles a year. So it's really at full capacity, and I am now in discussions with Ms. Boulay of the Ministry of Transport of Quebec. We work closely with people in Quebec, and we announced over $400 million for building in the island of Montreal for repairs, and we work closely with the Quebec government on alternatives. There's another subject. I didn't intend to ask all my questions at one time, but I'll ask you another one. You talk about the systematic keeping of your promises. Is that the question? But now, so with respect to that, what about the Quebec City Bridge? I think some time ago when the Liberals were in government, in 2004, we'd asked for the bridge to be repainted, and the minister at the time talked about having certain processes, and you said, no, we're going to do things another way that will be faster. And now we've been told that the bridge will not be repainted. So given that it's going to be the 400th anniversary of Quebec City, or that it was, I'd like to know why you're not going to at least repaint the bridge for the celebrations. And will you commit to doing so quickly? Or do we have to wait for another election, another string of promises? Well, I know that there are historic sites in Quebec City that you seem to have finished or deliberately have not mentioned, perhaps deliberately not mentioned. There is a commitment, but it must be remembered that the bridge belongs to CN. It does not belong to the federal government, nor to the Quebec government. We have begun talking to CN so that they will assume their responsibility. And as you were able to see, they did not decide to go forward, so we have no choice but to sue CN, or at least to make sure that they carry out their responsibilities and commit to painting the bridge and ensuring its maintenance. There is now something before the courts. There are negotiations underway, and as you know, when there are negotiations that lead nowhere, the only thing that can be done is to make sure that the courts, to have the courts rule. You also seem to forget that the Canadian government, with respect to the 400th anniversary of Quebec City, has put almost $110 million into the festivities. I think it's important to mention this. So we are participating in the event. It's highly important to us.
Thank you, Minister, for coming out today. An interesting committee that I believe works well as we've tackled just a number of things, everything from rail and air safety and also the effective, efficient rail transfers for our shippers. And so we've looked at a lot of things, which now takes me to, and even at our ports, obviously, Minister, is there what are the key principles in which our imports and exporting nation, as we are as an exporting nation, work hard together at. So, which takes me now to the navigable waters that we've endeavored upon, and actually have the support of everyone, I think, moving ahead on this. But because we've laid out I think it was the largest since World War II in terms of an infrastructure program of $33 billion. I'm wondering just how the value, how that adds value to the overall review of the infrastructure projects that may come forward.
You know, one of the elements, of course, of the infrastructure program is that while we are committing to spend over the next 7 years $33 billion, that initiative, of course, will, let's take, for instance, the communities component, will compel and engage the provinces as well as local municipalities to be able to do the projects that they want to put forward, whether they be in the environmental sector, they touch water, wastewater management systems, roads, public transit, a series of infrastructure needs and wants that are there. So this $33 billion, in our estimation, will go and generate roughly $50 billion in terms of the other projects or the other funding. Added on to that, of course, is the amounts of money in terms of public-private partnership. We talked about being able to find a way to engage the private sector, I should say, to levy up some money, because there is money that is available in Canada, and we feel that it's a good way to merge public interests as well as private interests together to make sure that we do have and meet the challenge of rebuilding our infrastructure in Canada.
I wonder, just when we were talking about infrastructure, in your comments earlier, you'd mentioned that, in fact, half of the funding in terms of this, $17.6 billion to be exact, is going to municipalities. This goes out in terms of GST and gas rebate. And just as a comment, during the break, I have a number of municipalities in my rural riding, 13 or 14, that I actually visited and took to them what it actually meant to them in terms of sustainable funding. As you know, that was one of the key issues that not only the municipalities of our regions, but the Canadian Federation wanted. And I just want to tell you that actually when I relayed to them that actually next year the gas tax would be double, it's something that seemed very positive, because I, as a municipal head of council for a few years, as you have, Mr. Minister, that type of sustainable funding is so important that they can count on. That was the message that came back to me, is that it's sustainable funding that they can count on, that they can build on. If they don't do it this year, they can build it up, and in fact, they can borrow back on it. So that's just a comment, I think, in terms of the funding and the flexibility that I heard, and I was just asked actually by a number to pass on that to you about how important that has been. I'd like to just shift gears a little bit, if I could, to my next question, and this has to do with the Railway Safety Act review that this committee has gone through, and I think was very successful at it, and tabled it on March the 7th of this year. Contained 56 recommendations, and then the committee actually took those recommendations, which we endorsed, and then added to it particular issues that we saw as addendums to it. You've actually had now, I guess, close to a couple of months to reflect on it. One, your comments, I guess, in terms of do you feel, what sort of a response you'd have in terms of that report?
Thank you very much, colleague. I think when we got here, one of the most important issues was basically railway safety. We had seen an increase in the number of car derailments, accidents, environmental problems, the respect of the regulations that were in place. So we determined that it was important to proceed with a review, and I believe that all the colleagues around the table here were in agreement with that way of doing things. We then called upon former Minister of Transportation, Doug Lewis, to chair up that committee, and as you mentioned, he did table his report not long ago. Among the things that he noted is that there needs to be an increase in terms of communications of all parties who are involved in the field of railway safety, whether they be from the union labor association or the person who works in that area, or whether they be the boss of the company or his representative. There has to be an advisory panel, and that was, I think, one of the major components in terms of Doug Lewis's recommendation. So we immediately brought together people from all sectors of the industry, all peoples who are involved in the issue of railway safety. We brought that board together. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity, I guess last week, to sit down with them and thank them, of course, for their participation. But I clearly feel that that was one of the things that was lacking, among other recommendations, of course, but that was one of the sectors where we needed to be able to be more proactive. So what we have now established is a permanent way of speaking with people on issues that affect their industry, and that is extremely important, because that will help us as parliamentarians to move forward with other measures that need to be put in place. Having said that, I think that the general gist of what we needed to do was to be able to look at the regulations that are there, and how can we in some ways tweak them or modernize them so that they do indeed reflect what we want as parliamentarians, as Canadians, in terms of railway safety and how we should go about it. So I think that we're on the right course. We're going in the right direction with not only this advisory panel, but also with the recommendations that Mr. Lewis put forward in his group.
Thank you, Minister, for the opportunity to ask a few questions. I have, I'll touch first of all on issues relating to the Asia-Pacific Gateway, for which I'm the critic for our party. And then I'd like to ask a question on the rail study that will relate to one of the items that came out of Mr. Lewis's report was the need for Transport Canada to have additional resources, financial resources, to deal, in fact, with the issue adequately of rail safety, and to whether that's what plans you have for that. I would like to ask another hat regarding air transport, and you talk about blue skies. I'm concerned about approved destination status not coming to Canada for the more open transportation, tourism arrangements, and the air travel between China and Canada. And finally, my question would relate to infrastructure, and I've heard questions in the past from some of the members across the table here on infrastructure money that would be available, for example, for community centers. And I know that I was directed towards you on the North Shore of Vancouver. We have a large Persian community, Iranian immigrants, who have been asking, and there's been commitment statements made by Minister Emerson and others that they were looking for money, and I'm wondering what progress has been to that. But to my main question, which relates to Gateway, I'm noticing in your section, parts 1 and 2 of your estimates, the funding contributions on page 24-5 for 2008-2009 for Asia-Pacific Gateway, you're showing $82 million. And you show that for 2007-8 you had estimates of $43 million. My understanding is you were, in terms of the comparable for the 5-year period, that when we, as Liberals, we committed to the Gateway Fund, we had talked about $591 million. You had $552 million, which I realize you've stretched out now to 2014 to hit $1 billion. But for 2008 and 9, I was showing a commitment from you of $158 million, and if I add this up, and if I go to section 2, part 3, page 13, I see another $9,700,000, which would only add up to about $92 million, so you're about $66 million shy, and I'm wondering why. And I'm looking at what it looks like projections of somewhere planned spending in 2009 and 10 of 142 and only 93 million in 2010-11. It looks like you're falling short of the commitment there, and I'd like you to comment on that.
Yeah, I think as it relates to those numbers, Mr. Bell, it basically is cash flow management. The government's commitment has been, and it's quite clear, we're spending $1 billion on the Asia-Pacific Gateway. And those projects, of course, as they come online, as the contribution agreements are signed with our partners, of course, we start spending the money. But there is a firm commitment. Budget 2007 indeed indicated that it's $1 billion that we're putting there. And so whether it be the South Perimeter Road or whether it be other projects, that's the amount of money that this government is committed towards those projects.
So you're suggesting that the commitment will be there, the amounts that are showing, although the cash flow is less than this year, the total commitment will be there.
I can let my officials, Mr. Bell, respond to that, Mr. Morancy or Chris Burr.
They can provide it to it, just so I can get the details.
I will be more than pleased to provide that information to you if you wish.
Would you talk about the rail, the commitment? Is your government going to be committing additional funds to Transport Canada as requested by Mr. Lewis?
As I mentioned before, we've already acted on that. The deputy and his team, as well as everybody in the department who are involved in this, are looking at the recommendations. We are quite satisfied with the recommendations, and we are now looking at ways that we can implement them. And as you know as well as I do, there are procedures in the government that we have to follow, but I can say that I'm extremely satisfied with the recommendations that Mr. Lewis put forward.
And what about community centers and funding?
You had air travel. I think,
air travel.
Yeah, the air travel issue. The deputy says that there are a lot of parts of that that deal with foreign affairs. So If there's a specific question, Mr. Bell, particularly to the blue sky policy, I'd be more than happy to answer it maybe in the next round, or if you're specific. On the rec centers and community centers, of course, those are components of the Building Canada plan that weren't necessarily categorized. If we lead in from the previous one, there are elements, of course, that we've increased. We alluded to it before. I believe Mr. Shipley spoke about the fact that the transfer of gas tax now, which is permanent, the Parliament of Canada determined that it was going to be permanent. Government accepted, and we went forward with that. I think that gives a lot more leverage to a lot of our communities across the country, because, as Mr. Shipley was mentioning, communities and municipalities can now go out and borrow on the fact that there is a more stable long-term financial sustainability for a lot of these communities. But we haven't closed any doors, and so I'm not excluding anything from as we move forward.
Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for appearing today. And I want to commend the Minister for the recent announcement in Windsor with respect to the Windsor-Essex Parkway proposal from DRIC. I want to commend the Minister for, of course, reiterating the federal government's important funding commitment to that project. The initial down payment of $400 million and a commitment to up to 50% of the eligible capital costs for essentially the extension of a provincial highway, but critical to an end-to-end solution at for new capacity at that corridor. Single most important piece of infrastructure in Canada, in my opinion, and our commitment represents the largest infrastructure investment in a single project since World War II, if I'm not mistaken, and that's going to help transform our economy. Having said that, I want to shift to one of the more significant areas this committee has dealt with, and that's railway safety. You've indicated your initial reaction to the report being positive, and I wanted, building on your initial reaction to that, this report has, I believe it's 56 recommendations. That's an awful lot of recommendations. My concern is that with so many recommendations, that we could wind up engaging in an exercise of checklists for bureaucrats, and without an awful lot of focus. And I kind of want to bring the question of the report back to an issue of focus moving forward with that report. Now, my understanding of the heart of that railway safety report, and I think it was somewhere around page 73, 74 of the report, was getting to stage 5 on the evaluation tool, which is full implementation of SMS, both for the rail industry as well as for the regulator, Transport Canada. Achieving that would put us in a position of having the highest possible safety in the rail sector. Mr. Lewis agreed with that when I questioned him. So, Mr. Minister, of all those recommendations put forward by the panel, what do you think is the most important of these recommendations? What's the most important focus to come out of this report so that we actually get some things achieved rather than, you can't serve 2 masters, you certainly can't serve 56 masters. Where do you see the focus of this report going for Transport Canada?
I think that the findings in the 56 recommendations, if I were to give you a sense of where I thought the whole meat and potatoes should be, is the partnership between the parties that are involved in this. And I think that Doug Lewis mentioned the importance of strengthening that partnership. Why do we want to strengthen the partnership? Well, because we're talking about safety, and as you know, we're looking at safety management systems. This committee is more familiar with that issue. And why do we want to do that? Because I repeat exactly what I said before. It's an additional layer of security. It's an additional layer of safety that we're providing Canadians as well as members of the industry. So the whole crux of where we want to go articulates itself around that partnership. That's the reason why fundamentally we brought together that panel. We brought together people from the industry to be able to sit down and, yeah, there are differences. Sure, there are opinions that are different from other opinions that are sought. People have views and they express them differently, given, of course, their background and given where they're coming from. So it's important as parliamentarians, but also as a government, to be able to sit people down and say, okay, what are those issues? How can we best address them? Get communications flowing again, get the partnership to be strengthened, and make sure that the initiatives that we're putting forward through SMS are well understood, they're well committed to, well engaged in, and fundamentally will answer, I believe, a lot of the other issues that are there. So it's if you're asking me, what is the overarching, it's the fostering, promoting, and building stronger partnership.
Thank you, Minister. With respect to the full implementation of SMS for the air side, we've, Bill C-7 talked about a system of non-punitive reporting. I'm not sure that, or can we expect something similar with respect to the rail industry? Is there some involvement in that with Transport Canada working in that direction? Obviously, the goal in fully implementing SMS is to capture the most amount of information possible, so that we can become predictive about where the challenges are for rail safety. So, key to that, as we've acknowledged in our legislative amendments for the air sector, was something along the lines of non-punitive reporting. Can we expect similar for the rail industry?
As we move forward at this juncture, what we need to look at is fundamentally what we could call, Mr. Watson, a culture change. We need to be able to say that that person who has come forward and said, we have to fix such and such a thing, that person will do it without any threat, without any notion of being punished in some way, shape, or form, that has to be done from the highest levels to, of course, the lowest levels in any organization. And I think that's comes back to what I was mentioning before in terms of the partnership. We don't want to be able to come forward and punish somebody because that person is actually helping us promote the system. We want to be able to encourage them to do it. We want to be able to thank them for doing it. And we want to be able to say that we do have an excellent regime in the country.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Paul Findlay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister. And I'd also like to thank the other witnesses.
My question has to do with an item in the budget that the Minister of Finance included money for a rail line to Peterborough, which I will add happened to go through the Minister of Finance's own writing. But given that this is my first main estimates, I was wondering if you could maybe help me in finding. I didn't see a reference to that. I'm not sure where that comes in. And just to add that when it came out in the budget, there were certain concerns about a lack of costing and a lack of analysis in establishing that as an important budget item. So if you can elaborate on that, that would be very helpful.
Well, first of all, I'm pleased to be here and to have the opportunity of conversing and exchanging with you, Madam Hall Finlay, and just to point out that you're alluding to the Capital Trust Fund that we put forward, $500 million that was extended across the country on a pro rata basis or based on population. And the share for Ontario, of course, is an amount of money that will be directed to the Peterborough line. What we've agreed to with the province of Ontario is that there will be a joint study that will be undertaken to be able to maximize the data, get the information. And we as a government have committed to put our share of money for that project. We feel that as the Golden Horseshoe area of Greater Toronto expands, there is a requirement, there is more and more of a requirement to, yes, support and foster intercity transportation, but also urban transit. And in that vein, it's important that we celebrate the amount of money, $500 million across the country, frankly, to be able to do that. It's a budgetary item. We've set up the capital trust with the deputy has worked very hard to set the capital trusts up across the country, and I can report back that all of them have been signed, all of them have been agreed to, and we are going to move forward with the spending of that money.
If I have two add-on questions, I suppose. One is that in your consultations with the Ontario government, has the Ontario government talked about other possibilities and not just the Peterborough line, because of obviously some concerns about whether that in fact is a priority or should be a priority from a transportation and infrastructure perspective. But I think it's important that we have those concerns addressed. So that one question. And the second, yes, the Golden Horseshoe, of course, is important from a transportation infrastructure perspective, but there is a continuing conversation and perhaps a needed continued further conversation about high speed between Montreal, Toronto, Quebec City, Ottawa, that corridor. And if you could talk a little bit about where the government is in that regard, that would be very helpful.
Of course, as we move forward, and I can report back to you, as I mentioned in my opening statement, that discussions with the Government of Ontario are going well. And so the Building Canada plan will be able to look at components of some of the issues that are raised as priorities for the Government of Ontario, as well as priorities for the Government of Canada and the Province of Ontario. So I believe that we are making progress on that level. On the Peterborough issue, I repeat once again, it is a joint study that is going to be undertaken both by the Government of Canada as well as the Government of Ontario. And to complete that thought on the issue of high-speed rail link between Quebec City and Windsor, the Premier of Ontario, as well as the Premier of Quebec and the Government of Canada through Transport Canada, will be trilaterally funding a committee whose responsibility will be essentially to go back and see whether or not, since the last study that was done, I believe in 1998, if I'm not mistaken, and the project costing was up in the vicinity of $20 billion. We want to see if there basically is a modal shift. So there is an agreement between the Premier of Ontario, the Premier of Quebec, and the Government of Canada to see whether or not we can update that information that had been gathered back in 1998 so that we can have another determination, another sort of, so to speak, look at that file and see how it has evolved. There are, of course, a number of new issues that appear. The climate change issue is extremely important in terms of protecting our environment. How should we go about, for instance, to make sure that Canadians who generally take one mode of transportation would probably be interested in taking another mode of transportation? Those are the kinds of questions that the premiers as well as the Government of Canada want to look at. So we've given ourselves a timeline until December. When do we expect, Deputy? Next year? A year. It's a $2 million some odd study, so that's where we are on that one.
And just finally, a sense of the timing for when that money will actually be flowing. So in terms of getting these agreements signed and actually...
The framework agreement with the Province of Ontario, I expect, as discussions go forward, I would like to be able to get this done by the beginning or the middle of the summer at the earliest.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming today. I'm actually, my question is going to be a little bit different and on a different topic. I know we've taken some great steps as a government in the safety and security of Canadians and also in the environment, specifically in a lot of areas. I know that $160 million over 2 years was invested by this government in the eco-auto strategy, and great news, some 77,000 Canadians made applications, and actually we've rolled out just over $51 million for those initiatives. So we're trying to make more fuel-efficient vehicles get on our roads, and I think that's great news for the health of Canadians and the future of our children. But recently, The Economist, I think it was this week or last week, The Economist said that we're blocking the sale of Zen cars in Canada, and that's a great concern to me because obviously I would like to be like most Canadians, and that would be non-gas dependent, be able to plug my vehicle into my house and be able to take off in the mornings. So I'm very interested in that. I know provincial and territorial governments actually regulate the use of vehicles on our roadways, but I'd like to know a little bit more information if indeed Transport Canada is blocking the sale of these vehicles in Canada.
Well, let me say at the outset, Transport Canada is not blocking. Transport Canada's job, so to speak, is to be able to see whether or not the vehicles that go on Canadian roads are safe. And Transport Canada has looked at this vehicle. I've had an opportunity of stating this on several occasions. Transport Canada has looked at the security of this vehicle, the safety, I should say, of this vehicle, and has determined that it falls in a category which is determined as being a fuel-efficient vehicle for low safety purposes, or at least
speed.
Low speed, I'm sorry, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. As you know, Transport Canada does not tell a province you can or cannot have that car on your roads. Transport Canada determines the safety, then the provinces individually determine whether or not they want that vehicle on their roads and on what conditions. All we do is say, this vehicle is safe at such and such a speed, or it isn't safe at such and such a speed. That's our responsibility. So we've got a team of experts that work on that. They determine whether or not it is life-threatening or not life-threatening, it is injury-prone or not injury-prone. But the job comes to the provinces, who are the ones who emit licenses. They're the ones that determine, yeah, okay, that's fine. That vehicle can go on a golf course, or it can go in a small residential sector, or it can go on a highway. But the federal government doesn't determine that. It's the provinces that determine that. I repeat, because there is some confusion out there, that the government of Canada is deliberately trying to thwart an entrepreneur from selling his vehicles in Canada. That's not the case. We say your vehicle is safe, it isn't safe. Then you can go out and convince the provinces where they should run these vehicles. And those are the rules and the regulations, particularly the regulations that have been put in place by the government of Canada over a number of years. That's our responsibility. On fuel efficiency, I think you alluded to before the fact that we brought in a program. As we move towards more fuel-efficient vehicles, we have to be able to, on the one hand, and that was the purpose of coming in with our eco package, we have to be able to get consumers to look at and change their behavioral patterns in terms of consuming or purchasing vehicles that are more fuel efficient. But as you know, we are going to be putting forward regulations that will be the most stringent, dominant North American standard. We're going to be working with the auto manufacturers on those. We'll be working with the interested parties. We'll be working with provincial governments on those issues. We'll be working with retailers. I know that my colleague, Mr. Volpe, and myself, as well as other members, I believe, of this committee, were at the Retailers Association of Canada, where we were, as a matter of fact, talking about this issue. It's extremely important that the Government of Canada and Canadians speak with one voice on this. There is, yes, of course, concerns in terms of the environment, but there's also concerns in terms of jobs and job creation, and we're trying to be able to balance both of these issues together.
Well, it's good to see you're keeping Canadians safe, and indeed, my understanding after speaking to the department is that Zen is actually intending to have a fully safety certified electric car in the fall of 2009, so that's good news for consumers that want to go that route. I'm also curious, we've made some, as a federal government, some great initiatives in major centres like Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver in the way of rail and transit security and just rail and transit investments. And are the provinces supportive of our approach to rail and transit security? Do they view us as being effective in this?
Well, once again, here we are. We're in our area of jurisdiction, our area of responsibility, and once again, we want to be able to make sure that the amounts of money that are provided for in terms of security are well spent. Indeed, you're right. I look at urban transit, for instance, as one of the sectors that we've helped over the last year and a half. We've helped urban authorities, or at least transit authorities throughout the country, whether they be in Toronto or in Montreal or elsewhere, or even here in Ottawa, to modernize their equipment, radio communications equipment, their surveillance equipment. We're not immune from any terrorist threat. I say this and this is not flippant. It's an important issue. We have to be able to go forward and make sure that public services that are used are safe. I know if I go back to my previous life as chair of the Transit Authority on the other side of the river here, I remember my predecessor, as a matter of fact, coming to meet me and discuss this as an important issue. And it is an important issue because on a yearly basis, particularly with the Ottawa and the Gatineau system, it's over 50 million passengers, I should say, that embark on these buses on a yearly basis. And that is multiplied throughout the country. So we have to remain vigilant. We have to be able to come forward and put the proper amounts of money to be able to make sure that Canadians feel safe and secure when they use these public facilities. And it goes for ferries, it goes for urban transit, it goes in our ports. It's a necessity of life now in the year 2008.
Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Thank you. As we traditionally do, I'm going to open the floor up for a couple of final questions, 2 minutes each, and I'll start with Mr. Volpe, and I have Monsieur Laframboise and Mr. Bevington, if you want, on the list here. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Minister, I'm going to use a different approach. If you don't mind, I'll list off a series of questions, then you can go ahead. I was a little bit surprised to hear you say that the Capital Infrastructure Trust that you started is for $500 million, $200 million of it for the Peterborough to Toronto line. That would represent apparently all of the amounts of money set aside for Ontario. I wonder whether that's a misperception on my part or whether that's an accurate reflection of the figures as you've put them. Secondly, with respect to high-speed train travel, that's been studied ever since I've been here, and we started at $2 billion when I first came here, and I heard you say $20 billion. If life is for learning, then railways or that high-speed travel must be for environmental assessments and feasibility studies, I guess. I don't know how much we've spent on that so far. Maybe you would tell us how much we spent on feasibility studies, and if that amount has already exceeded the initial $2 billion allocated. Thirdly, I noticed that you've almost doubled the amount of money that you have set aside, that you've put as a federal subsidy to via rail. And I'm wondering whether that reflects a doubling of the ridership or whether it's a doubling of the subsidy per capita. It used to be a few short years ago about $64 per passenger. And is it your intention to encourage passenger ridership by doubling that subsidy? Fourth, okay, great. Well, let me get on to the Eco Auto rebate for a second. And since safety on the highways as well as environmental efficiency is a concern of yours, apparently, I'm wondering whether you've had an opportunity to take a look at my private member's bill regarding electronic stability control and its impact both on the efficiency of the fuel emissions, but most importantly, the safety of ridership on the highways, and whether you intend to support that bill or replace it with one of your own.
No, on the last question, I haven't had the opportunity, but I certainly will look at it with a great deal of pleasure and get back to you on it. On the on the Transit Trust Fund, the $195 million. That will, of course, be complemented once the joint study is completed. That will be complemented by monies coming from the Building Canada Fund. So just to reassure you that we're not saying that this project is topped at. What we're saying to you fundamentally is, depending on the results of the feasibility study or the joint study, we will have access to Building Canada funds to help promote that project. You're right in terms of the feasibility studies for the Windsor Quebec corridor. There has been numerous studies. My deputy minister could, who has. He is Phil Chuck.
He answers the question.
He actually, you're absolutely right. I think he started in the department 30 years ago, and they were talking about that project. So he's facetiously saying, kicking me under the table here. But that study basically will, as I mentioned before to Madam Hall Finley, will be able to give us a general appreciation of what the cost is going to be. But it was at $18 to $20 billion last time around, with the, I think, public sector paying about 80% of the amount of money. So that has to be looked at. Yes, indeed, we've invested $692 million or 672 or whatever to Via Rail. The idea here is to be able to modernize its infrastructure. Some of the locomotives, particularly the F40 locomotives, are old locomotives. They need to be refurbished. Via Rail made the case, their board of directors, to us, that it was extremely important for them to go forward, make these changes, and have a more environmentally friendly kind of locomotive that they're putting forward. So given that fact, as well as the importance to maintain the reliability of the network, Via want to be able to double some of their lines where there is a lot of congestion, and to assure that intercity travel, passenger services will be at their peak and operate quite in a proficient way. The Eco Auto program, I'm sorry I didn't get the last part of the question. Maybe you just want to run it by me quickly.
Hopefully to be fair to others.
Well, I want to be fair to others, so if we get another chance in 2 minutes, I'd be delighted to go there. But I tried to relate that to the ESC system that I presented in November. So, but I think you answered that. I was kind of surprised that wasn't your first item of priority after I did that.
Well, I did answer that as the first one.
Yeah. So.
Monsieur le Ministre,
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Minister, you talked about Building Canada, but the agreement with Quebec in this program hasn't been signed yet, right? Quebec hasn't signed. Well, yes, it hasn't been announced yet. There have been discussions about the corridor, etc. Are you the one who's negotiating the agreement with Quebec? Because since your government's been in place, there's this new thing on the block. There have been rumors, there have been discussions. Who's negotiating? I have the mandate, and I negotiate with the Minister of Finance of Quebec. So De Canada is a partner, and it has a specific role to play regarding the program delivery, a part of the program delivery. So if there's no agreement, that means that you are demanding too many things. Why are you demanding things from Quebec that no other government has demanded? Well, it's not what Ms. Marois said the other day. I know the facts, Mr. Laframboise. Mr. Laframboise, you know that Alberta hasn't signed, Ontario has not signed, Quebec hasn't yet signed. So There's a normal timetable of discussions with partners. There are 8 territories and provinces who have signed. And I remember when I first came here, there were former programs that had been announced 4 or 5 years ago. Some of them still hadn't been signed. There were negotiations that had been dragging on for 5 years with the Quebec. So we dealt with those issues. You didn't want to talk to me about La 30, the 30. But we did work in a spirit of cooperation. So I'm rather... Am I concerned that there won't be an agreement with Quebec? Not at all. Well, we know that in the 2007 budget, the Building Canada program hadn't been signed yet. The program agreement hadn't been signed yet with Quebec. Mr. Laframboise, you know that in 2007 our objective was to meet with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, to meet with various interested parties. I toured various municipalities in Quebec. I listened to these people, and these people wanted full consultations. And you've worked in the municipal field, as I have, and you know that it's important to consult, because the municipal level is a level at which people can really state their opinions. And we, as a government, we carried out these consultations, except that these over 1,000 municipalities are keen to get this underway. But yes, well, you seem to have forgotten we need Quebec's agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for appearing today. I have 3 questions relating to mostly to infrastructure in the Northern Territories. First one is that there's been some work through the NWT Association of Communities and as well through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in endorsing resolutions that would ask you to design a municipal infrastructure program that would more suit the Northern Territories and perhaps some of the smaller provincial jurisdictions like Prince Edward Island, where the costs of delivery of infrastructure is so much higher than the rest of the country. So that's the first question. Have you considered a program like that? Are you moving ahead to consider a program like that? Second question deals with the urgent need for infrastructure within the Northwest Territories to match up to the requirements for resource development that have been plaguing us in the last number of years. And there are 2 initiatives currently underway in the Northwest Territories. One of them, of course, is the Mackenzie River Bridge, which our government of Northwest Territories is moving ahead with now and which is looking for support. And will actually, when it's put in place, will turn money back into the federal treasury, and that it will provide a more efficient system of transportation for the mining, the diamond mines, and the mining development in the North Slave province, which directly turns back royalties and taxation to the federal government. So there is a quid pro quo here in terms of investment and return on investment for the federal government. As well, the government of Northwest Territories, in conjunction with its Crown Corporation, the Power Corporation, is moving ahead with the Tolson Hydro Initiative, which is an opportunity to provide clean energy to the diamond mines. Once again, this will have a very strong positive impact on the future of the mining industry in that area, and will return dollars to the federal treasury. So on that point, are you considering how to invest in the Northwest Territories to make those types of returns to this government?
To answer those, because we are running out of time. I'm sorry, Mr. Bevington.
Quickly, Mr. Bevington, thank you for your questions. It's extremely important because it enables me to talk once again about the Building Canada plan. One of the important components in the Building Canada plan is the flow of the base funding, $25 million per jurisdiction for the next 7 years. So in the case of Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, or the Yukon, as well as the other provinces, it's $175 million that will flow. The requirements that are asked for by the federal government is submit to us the list of projects that you want to fund, and in as much as they fall within the Building Canada categories, these projects will be eligible. So there's a lot of flexibility, as well as with the gas tax, of course, but I come back to this. This offers for the first time for those parts of the North in Canada, flexibility to be able to pursue those particular projects that they want to look at. I'd say you've asked in terms of, what the participation is. Generally speaking, we ask with the base funding provinces to participate 50% to what we're putting in. But in the case of the territories and the province of Prince Edward Island, we're asking them only to put in 25% of the total amount. So there is flexibility within the program.
Final question, Mr. Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, I'm interested a little bit about talking about open skies, blue skies, at this government's initiative in relation to helping consumers across this country. But first, I'd like to just say, Minister, how I spoke to the Minister of Transport of Northwest Territories 2-3 weeks ago, and he is absolutely ecstatic with this government's participation in the Northwest Territories, and very, very happy. He wanted to give me personal kudos about how happy he was with this government. And indeed, I am as well, Mr. Minister, because I've seen the investment in my own riding to keep Canadians safer. When this government got into power, one of the first investments was to twinning of Highway 63, which is one of the most dangerous highways in this country. But my interest is to talk a little bit about blue skies, because indeed this government, since the announcement in November 2006, Iceland, Ireland, New Zealand, Barbados have all we've all concluded open skies agreements with those countries. And indeed, I understand the EU is currently in negotiations. But these blue skies, we know that consumers will be happy, Canadians will be happy, because it's lower prices, better service, and more selection for them in their travels. And we also know that all of the participants, all of the stakeholders, including even unions and airports and airlines, all want these open sky agreements concluded quickly and efficiently. So congratulations to the government. But do you see, Mr. Minister, that we will be moving forward with expanded versions in the future to have real open skies agreements like we have concluded with these, or will we just continue on with adding some enhancements to the current agreements? Do you see more open skies agreements being concluded in the future with this government?
I think, coming back to your opening remarks, it's extremely important to emphasize the fact that this government is determined to offer consumers better prices, to offer the opportunity for consumers as well as carriers to select and go into marketplaces that weren't there before. As you alluded to, there's half a dozen since November of last year, or 2006, there are half a dozen blue skies or open skies agreements with a number of countries. We are working with the European Union. We're working with them extensively, negotiating with them. We want to focus on the Asian continent, as well as the Americas as our next step. That is the focus of our attention in the coming years. At the end of the day, when we are able to drive the prices down and we offer Canadians the opportunity of being able to fly in areas where they would have never expected to go, I think that is achieving a goal and an objective that we as a political party and as well as a government want to go forward. You mentioned that that it's important for the government to seek out new opportunities. Yes, it is important for the government to seek out new opportunities in this area. I'm pleased. We want to be able to push that forward. We want to be able to go further in that area. Will we ever get to a cabotage agreement? That's probably something that will be looked at by either our successors in a several number of years. I know that the Americans have not yet gone in that direction. There doesn't seem to be, as of yet, an indication in the marketplace that that is going there, but there are a number of tools, either enhancements with different nations with whom we have already an agreement, or literally negotiations for open skies agreement. But we aren't yet rounded at, or we're not yet at the level of cabotage, which is the sixth or seventh freedom. I'm looking at my officials there. He's going to whatever, and so that's the general idea of where we want to go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister, and to your staff for attending and participating in a full and frank discussion of transport issues in Canada. For the committee, the next meeting on Tuesday, we will be dealing with the railway safety report. And I'm hoping on Thursday, if it isn't finished on Tuesday, we will wrap that up and do a subcommittee for the following agenda for the next, after the break. With that, committee is adjourned.